Communication. Join the nation. Communication revolution and evolution. Interpersonal communication. Interpersonal communication.
Before I begin,
sorry, there should be no talking.
So, just before I begin, I'd like to say that I'm very proud of these guys. They're all very smart, very hardworking, and they helped put together an amazing project. This is something that I've always wanted to do, and hopefully we hit the mark on this because it's a good story. So, beginning with lights. Okay, so my name is Taylor, and this is Christian, Harsmirat, and Grumkh. Today we'd like to speak with you all about a little bit about the evolution of human communication and interpersonal communication. And we're going to talk about the negatives, and we're going to talk about the positives, and Harsmirat is going to talk about where it could take us in the future in relation to technology and the advances that we're having today. But more importantly, we're going to talk about how we communicate verbally and non-verbally in terms of the things that we say to each other. So, I will be looking at these cards quite a bit. I'll have to deal with it. So, we're going to cover the last 240 years of this evolution and offer suggestions to the future of communication. But right now, I went too far. Grumkh, go ahead.
So my name is Grumkh, and today I'm going to talk about how technology has benefited the interpersonal communication over the last 200 years. So first, in my presentation today, I'm first going to talk about what interpersonal communication exactly is, and after that, the methods of communication. The method of communication that people used in the past, like telegram, letter writing, everything like that. And after that, I'm going to talk about the method of communication we are using now, and how the interpersonal communication has changed with the change in the technology with respect to the interpersonal communication. I would like to introduce Harsmirat, who's going to talk about
Harsmirat. I'm going to discuss how interpersonal communication may change over the next few years. Like, I'll cover the time for 20 years. So I'll say that how it is now and how it will be in future. So now I'll introduce questions.
Right, so we're going to be talking quite a bit about technology and communication, how they coincide, how communication has changed and evolved over the years. My piece is going to emphasize a little bit more about why communication is so important and how it changed our lives, and kind of further develop, technology and even more of how it influenced our lives even today on a day-to-day basis in terms of communication. And Taylor, you want to start us off?
Yeah, I'm going to get started here. This is my first slide. I don't know if any of you guys know who this is, but today I'm going to be speaking about Samuel Morse. He is the father of the Morse alphabet, which is used with the electric telegram, basically. And I'm going to speak about the continued evolution of communication and ultimately personal communication and interpersonal communication due to the efforts and work of Samuel Morse. Sorry, guys. That's what happens when you make your own cue cards. There we go. Now, it's true that technology may be one of the driving factors behind the evolution of sociological change, and in the following presentations we will discuss that. However, we will also investigate things that are more important. We'll look at moments. We will look at the moments over the last 240 years to 400 years, like Samuel Adams, that have helped to continue to define the growth and evolution of interpersonal communication. So, did you know that before the Morse code and the electric telegraph revolutionized communication, information was communicated across long distances using smoke signals and drum beats? And then later in the 17th century, the Simpora system. So, this is an interesting looking machine. It's the Simpora system. It consisted of a series of arms and mirrors that were movable, and they were used to signal letters and numbers. And usually, there's a lot of problems with this due to weather and stuff. second to read that. However, it lacked what? Oh, crap. That's not the right one. Okay, yeah, so this important system consisted of a series of hilltop stations. Read that. Thank you. Okay, so however, it lacked what I would consider a true quality of change in that the hardware did not offer a change linguistically towards human communication. Okay, so here we go. Methods such as sending smoke signals were limited by the weather, a need for clear lines of sight, and these limitations also affected the support system. So, different form of communication was necessary to make regular and reliable long-distance communication and interpersonal communication workable. And as such, it is my hypothesis that the electric telegraph and the creation of the Morse alphabet, see you back at home. Okay, were the beginning of the digital age of communication in the form of a new human language. So a language that started an evolution in the bonds of social structure that continue to this day. So, who was Samuel Morse? Well, on May 24th, 1844, Samuel Morse changed the future of human communication when he created an electrical signal and an alphabet system which was able to be broadcast across long distances. Now, to save myself talking and fumbling through my words, we're going to watch a really interesting video that anybody can understand quite literally. Which is not that. There we go.
Hey friends, I was just saying hi in Morse code. You know, before the telegraph, messages were handwritten and carried on horsebacks. I'm glad I have this telegraph that led to one of the greatest inventions. You must have guessed it's the Morse code. Let's find out some more. Zoom in. This is Samuel Morse, an art professor at the New York University. He always had a soft corner for science. One day, Samuel Morse received news which was urgent. Long after the event had occurred, he had lost out on bidding farewell to someone really dear, and this made him very furious. Unhappy with the communication system, he began thinking of ways to transfer messages in an instant from one place to another, and he finally created the telegraph. A communication system that transmitted electric signals over wires from location to location and then translated into a coded message. He used pulses of current to deflect an electromagnet, which moved a marker to produce written codes on a strip of paper. In 1837, Samuel Morse gave the first demonstration of his invention in a university classroom. His single-circuit telegraph worked by putting the operator key down to complete the circuit. The other side received the same electric signal and had to decode it. Inspired by this invention, a young man named Alfred Vail offered his assistance to improve the design. The device was then modified with Vail's idea to emboss the paper with dots and dashes. Vail created a new code system where going through hundreds of pages to read a message was avoided. To assign alphabets to these symbols, they counted the number of times every alphabet occurred in newspapers. They found that the alphabet E was the one to occur the most. So they assigned it the simplest of the symbol, a dot. This continued for the rest of the alphabets. And that's how an art professor invented the first machine to send and receive messages instantly. Wait on, I have more coming up for you. Trivia time! Did you know, in spite of all the technology, the upgraded version, which is the International Morse code, is used even today to navigate planes and naval ships. Morse code is also used by people who are differently abled, as they sometimes use the motion of their eyelashes to send messages across by fluttering their eyes for every dot and closing their eyes for a second for every dash. Well, I hope the message sent today was clearly received and well understood. Oh, do you hear that emergency distress signal? I better go help. See you next time, friends. This is me zooming out.
Okay.
Hey kids, you.
So I'm gonna go ahead here and you can turn the light back on, whoever has light thingy. Okay, so the reason why I picked this video is because it was interesting. It touches on a couple of things because we're talking about technology a lot. Ultimately, what you can hear in this video is that it was an emotional crisis that this man had to deal with that led to the advent of a new technology and a new language, whether it be encoding another language or not. So it doesn't get much more human than that. And this entire event has sparked, what in my opinion has become pretty much the digital age and our ability to, continuously transfer data at higher rates. So, as you can see, the Telegraph and Morse code came together to represent the pairing of biopsychology and basic electrical hardware to produce an evolution in interpersonal communication and communication between people. To a point in our history where people could begin to speak to each other, not only over long distances, but using a new form of language, Morse code. It's hard to believe that something so simple could strengthen the social bonds of our humanity and inspire a future rich in growth and evolving interpersonal communication, but here we stand today about to present such as the case. And we hope that by the end of our presentation, you will all agree with us that our humanity is the driving force behind the evolution of interpersonal communication and communication. The technology advances merely aid such advancements, and ultimately the evolution of human communication is driven by our humanity. And it serves the purpose and tenets of social change within the evolution of humanity's psyche. Now that I'm done, I'd like to thank everybody for listening to what I have to say, and I would like to introduce Grumkh.
So as I already mentioned, that I'm going to talk about how technology has benefited the interpersonal communication. So let's talk about interpersonal communication. So interpersonal communication exactly means the exchange of information between two or more persons. When two or more persons talk with each other, there is exchange of some message. Like one is sending something and other one is receiving something from you. So the interpersonal communication can be direct or indirect. So when a person is sending a message to someone, they are also sharing their feelings. So I'm going to talk about how technology has affected all that things. So let's talk about technology. Technology has changed the way we communicate with each other. So as we are passing through the information age, so the technological devices like telephone, mobile phone, television, and personal computer, they have totally changed the way we communicate with each other, and they took a specific space in our daily life that we are using our mobile phone and our PCs for every communication that we want to do with others. So it has definitely influenced our interpersonal communication. So also the internet has efficiently become an integral part of our life, because it had made globe a village where we can communicate with other persons in a fraction of seconds. So also email is fast and free and convenient method to send message to other people's over long distances. Also it helps us to keep in touch with others 24/7. Like with our mobile phone, we can keep in touch with other people's 24/7. Like we can use our phone, and with internet we can talk to anyone, anywhere, instantly. So internet also affected how couples are formed nowadays. So couples are now commonly paired through the dating websites using mobile phones and computers and the matchups. So like I wanna give the example of Tinder, where you can find a perfect match for you easily. So Also, the social media has break the communication barriers, so it is easy now to communicate with people than it is earlier. So I'm going to talk about the earlier method that people used to communicate with each other. So letter writing, it was a mean of communication for centuries between the peoples. It was as a inefficient means of communication, like because it took a lot of days to send a message from one place to another, because one had to wait for another person to travel from one place to another to carry his letter or mail to other person. So also there is no guarantee that the letter would reach its destination or not. The first United Post Office was created in 1775, but by 1828 the United States had like 7,800 post office, and United States was the largest postal system in that time. And the mails were transported at that time through the trains that were scheduled and was efficient and reliable. Letter writing also gained popularity as more Americans moved out west and they want to keep in touch with their relatives in the east. So with the evolution, people realized to talk with others and to stay in contact with others more efficiently. So this desire was realized with the invention of telegraph. The telegraph involved the sending of electrostatically generated signals through a wire. So telegraph allow for instant communication along long distances, something that has previously been unheard of and it is used during the wartime to transmit the information during World War I. In 1876, Alexander Bell observed that sound vibrations can also be transferred through the air from one place to another. And after that, he realized that human voice is also made up from sound vibrations. So he realized that human voice can also be transferred through the air. And he did a lot of experiments, and after a lot of trials and errors, later he invented the modern telephone. And during early 90s, a new form of communication and entertainment took place. It began as a short wave communication that is used during the World War, and it is called radio. And broadcasting began in 1914, but the broadcasting didn't hit the airwave until 1920. But after in 1925, after the establishment of Federal Communication Commission, the radio was officially launched, and approximately 2 million homes had radios, and there were several radio stations broadcasting new programs at that time. And let's watch a quick video about that.
How has communication changed over the centuries? More than you can imagine. The earliest way to communicate was face-to-face, and if you wanted to talk to someone in a neighboring town, you had to walk there to see them or send a message by word of mouth. Native Americans invented a way to communicate long distances by using smoke signals. When paper and ink became available, you could write a letter, but it might take weeks or even months for it to reach its destination, if it did at all. Letters could be delivered by horseback, stagecoach, or wagon. If you wanted to send a letter from Chicago to San Francisco, it would take a few months before it was delivered. For instance, after President Abraham Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation, it took more than 2 years for the word to reach all African Americans held as slaves. Sometimes letters were sent by ship, which would sail around the southern tip of South America to reach the other side of the United States. Then the Pony Express was put into action, and a letter that would take months now took 10 days to cross the country. It was a miracle. But the Pony Express was replaced by the telegraph. Using electrical signals, messages could be sent in moments over a wire connecting you from one person to another. Wires were strung all across the United States for telegraph communication. When the railroad was built, sacks of letters could be delivered in a shorter time and didn't have to take months by ship. Mail moved faster when it began to be delivered by airplanes. Then Alexander Graham Bell and his assistant Thomas Watson invented the telephone. Now people could send their voices long distances through wires. It was amazing. The telephone revolutionized communication. Bell and Watson's invention was improved upon over the decades into what we know today, which is the cell phone. Now we can communicate without wires at all. In our day, communication is fast and easy. The invention of the internet has made it possible to not only communicate, but share information like never before. You can instantly talk to friends and family that live across the street, across the country, or across the world.
In 1940, television made its official debut at New York World Fair. It was seen as an amusing but unnecessary appliance at that time because radio continued to be a favorite form of communication for people at that time. So radio popularity skyrocketed at World War II as television were not yet equipped to provide the accurate information or news about the war, but that's why the people were more using the radios than using the televisions. But after that, all began to change in 1940s. 4 million television sets were produced that year, but a 10-inch screen cost like $200. So it was so expensive for people to buy a television at that time. But as the year passes, the prices drop down, and now the majority of homes have a television. So now talk about what happened in last 40 years or where we are now. So after in last 40 years, technology served us with cell phones, internet, and social media. That had changed the interpersonal communication methods, and now the people can communicate over long distance in fraction of second, and instead of waiting for the letters or wasting time for writing letters to someone. So in our daily life in this tech-savvy world, the day begins with a good morning message on a phone, and it ends with a good night message on a phone. So the social media apps and sites are like a virtual world where we can virtual world I mean to say a computer-based world where we can create a avatar, a personal avatar, and we can communicate with anyone, anywhere on any website. So mobile, emails, and social networking sites are most popular means of communication among the youngsters nowadays too. So with that technology, communication is easy, and even in cases when you want to convey something to someone, mobile and emails are come in handy. So technology has made it easy to keep in touch with our old contacts and our relatives. So finding a date was not so easy in the past, but now it is so easy with social networking apps, and video chats have made play a big role in keeping the people in contact with each other. So this is how the communication, interpersonal communication has changed from the past till now. Now I would like to call Harsmirat to talk about his project.
So as my team members already discussed about the evolution of communication, how mode of communication has been changed over the centuries, as Taylor mentioned about the Samuel Morse and his invention, and Grumkh discussed about the next level advancement in the mode of communication. And now I am going to discuss how interpersonal communication may change over the next 20 or so years. So as Grumkh and Taylor have already mentioned that how communication have changed from telegraph to email to phone calls, and now to Snapchat, Instagram, the video calls, and it's heading towards many more easier and less time consuming ways such as virtual reality and artificial intelligence. So here is one example how human interaction in the future will be different from today. Right now, imagine you are working as a receptionist at a hotel, and you're checking through the lists that who are staying in the hotel and who are coming. Someone comes to the hotel at the check-in desk. You ask him how he is, how was his drive and all the stuff. You talk with him, how was his day, and then you ask his name, his address, and all the stuff that is required to check in, such as his credit card information and his personal stuff. So then after checking him in, you call your co-worker to take his car to the parking and carry his luggage to his room, and then you escort him to his room. So you can see that how easy how straightforward it is. But how it will differ from now in the future is that, imagine you're sitting on your desktop on the check-in desk, you're checking your computer, you receive a notification. It will tell you that someone is arriving in next 5 minutes. It will contain all of his information, all his data, credit card information, his name, his address, which language he prefers to speak in, which kind of room he wants, and whatever things he wants from you. So you check him in, and the only thing you have to do is go to the entrance with the keys of the room. And at the meantime, the person who is working in the parking department and the luggage department, he'll also receive a notification that someone is coming, and he has to go on the entrance to park the car and escort him in his room. So by this example, you can clearly see that how face-to-face conversation is gonna minimize in next couple of years. And now I'm sure that all of you might have heard about the virtual reality. So now I would like to show you the video how virtual reality is gonna change business communication.
Hi, my name is Daniela, and I'm responsible for Telesoft's stand for Mobile World Congress 2017. I'm almost happy with it, but I need a second opinion or two. Unfortunately, the people who I would like to chat with are not here, not even in the country. There's one exciting project we're working on at the moment. It's called VR Medusa. This is our designer Jonas. He should be putting finishing touches on the stand. And just like that, I'm in his virtual workspace. Hi Jonas! He's doing fine. This is Cornelius and Anthony. At the moment, they are playing a VR game in our office in Zurich. We all can interact with a 3D object Jonas has brought into the environment. We all can discuss here. So now we have the final blueprint, but we need an approval from our CEO. He's away with serious business matters, but that's not a problem. We can simply Skype him. Algirdas likes our final version and gives us a green light to build the stand. But first, let's see how it would look like in a real environment. I think we are all happy with the result. VR Medusa is the ultimate virtual reality business communication platform, offering connection between multiple individuals. The ability to manipulate virtual environments, user avatars, and actually see the exact replicas of participants makes VR Medusa the go-to tool in everyday communication processes.
So you already see that in future it won't be necessary to be in the same room to discuss a meeting. Like if we have to give a presentation, we don't need to sit together. We can do it whole by sitting in different countries, and still we can, if we are able to meet and discuss any, like as they discuss the 3D model with the help of virtual reality. So now I'm going to talk about one more example of how minimal interaction and minimal interpersonal communication is So one more example of minimal interaction and minimal interpersonal communication is the new food delivery apps such as Skip the Dishes, DoorDash, Uber Eats. Like it is latest in trend, and most of you guys know that you have to just open the app, look for the restaurant, whichever you like it almost contains 200 to 300 restaurants from the local areas. You can choose whatever you like, and then you can look for your food. So what you have to just do is click on the food. The restaurant will get the notification that you have which food you want. They'll start preparing it, and the Skip the Dishes app will themselves they will connect with the courier. He'll get the information of the restaurant and of the customer who wants the food. So he'll get the time, what time he have to reach to the restaurant. He goes to the restaurant, picks up the food, and then he'll go back to the customer's house. So there's no interaction between the customer and the restaurant owners or any other person. The only time he have to interact with anyone is just when he have to take his food from the door. and then that's all for the skip the dishes. So you can see this limits the human interaction as it eliminates your chance of meeting someone that you would have meet when you're on your way to the restaurant or when you are in the restaurant. So we can see everything is same as you give the money to the restaurant and in return they give you the food. The only things that you're missing is the interpersonal communication with the waitress, with the manager, or with the friends with whom you might have gone to have the food. So in future we can expect that it's gonna increase because the internet is gonna expand, and the expansion of internet will lead to the connection of people all around the world. No matter where the person is, everyone would be connected. Like the separated families, they can use visual reality so that they feel that they're sitting together, they're talking, and the students can learn scientific experiments, like they can feel they're part of the scientific experiments that are happening in other continents, not even in the countries, in other continents. So they can feel, they can learn, and the third world doctors can talk to the experts of their fields to operate their patients better. So advancement will further help in expanding the businesses and will be cost effective and less time consuming with the help of VR and artificial intelligence. So as we have talked about lots of positive effects of advancement in communication, now let's talk about the negative ones too. As with the advancement, we discussed that world will become more globalized and small global village, and English will become a global language. It will be used in every part of life, business, school, work, and daily activities too. Like here in Canada, English is common, but in some other countries, in Asian countries like Bangladesh or you may say India, they prefer the native languages to talk with each other. But in few years, as English is the only source to do good business and stuff, so everyone wants to excel in their life. So I think the native languages are gonna diminish. They will be just limited to the room talks or the family talks. Like the family, they will talk in their own native language, but when they go out of their house, whoever they're meeting, they'll prefer talking in English. So one more thing we will witness in coming years is people, while sitting on the table, will not live the moment, but they will share the moment on the apps such as Instagram, Facebook, or Snapchat. They want So as you can see in this picture, everyone has the phone and he or she is recording the video of any event or any game that's going on. You can see this lady, she's the only one who is enjoying the moment with her real eyes. Everyone from them, they're gonna watch the video afterwards. Even some of their friends will watch the video earlier than them. They're over there, but they're not living the moment. That's the only lady who is enjoying the moment. So the interpersonal communications gonna decrease a lot compared to now or the few years back, as I am 90s kid. So when I was younger, I used to meet my friends daily, play with them, sit with my family, talk about my school, talk about all the stuff that's happening in my life, what I want or whatever. But as from last 3 or 4 years, I am also more into phone. I like to less socialize with my friends. I just talk them on my Snapchat, Instagram, or by call. I don't meet them as often. I do like to sit in my bed, play games or stuff rather than going outdoor and meeting them on daily basis. So, and you can see new generation kids, they're more into it. They don't even like to meet their friends more often. They just chit chat on their phone, Snapchats and all the stuff. So we can see that communication and technology goes hand in hand, and advancement too. It has both negative and positive effects on humanity. So it's in our hand how we can use and handle it. And now I'll pass over to Chris.
All right, awesome, excellent. Okay, so we heard a lot. Taylor talked a lot about some early technologies that affected the way we communicate, hand signals, line of sight, things like that, the way perhaps, as I believe your video said, is how some of the Aboriginal people actually used smoke to communicate. We also then had, electronics, things like that. Early ways of communicating instantly suddenly appear, and it really ballooned the way we can communicate. Lastly, we were talking about the future, where we're heading. Things are getting more efficient, better. What does that mean for us? It means less face-to-face communication, more indirect, instantaneous communication. What I'm going to be talking about is, so what? So technology is changing the way we talk, it's getting faster, more efficient. Why do you have to care? What's the point? Why does that matter? Why does communication really matter all that much in our lives? Yeah, okay, so it changes our day-to-day thing. I get a little bit chubbier every time I use skip the dishes, I don't go out, that kind of thing, right? It goes a little bit beyond that. What I'm going to talk about are three main points. 1, religion, believe it or not. 2, war. And 3, misinformation. Firstly, religion. This is the earth, I hope you can tell. Those different colors resemble different religions that are popular in those areas. Blue is Christianity, green is Islam. You may not be able to see the bottom part of Africa, that's not the ocean, that is Africa. It is Christian, to be considered Christian because of when the Europeans went down there and did their stuff, right? The point is that if you can see any part of the globe that doesn't have a color on it, that should mean something. That means that every single part of the globe has been communicated this religion, this way of life, these teachings. How did they do that? Well, they had the printing press, they had all those different things, they had these technologies, but they had to communicate it. And they had to communicate it well. They had the bishops, they had the priests, they had all these different people. They were literate, they could read. They had a Bible, a copy of the Bible, in Latin, of course. But the point is that Latin became popularized. It became a way to communicate throughout all of Europe. This is just an example of that. Religion wouldn't be as big as it is today without evolving communication. Second thing, this guy, he kind of puts nerds to shame, really. Like, if you looked up the definition of a nerd, this guy's probably like a god compared to him. This is Alan Turing. I'm going to get into him a little bit more, but first I'm going to talk about this thing, which is what he had to solve. Anybody know what this is? Well, you're so smart. For everyone else who doesn't know, this is the device called the Enigma. It's probably the main reason, actually, the Germans in World War II were so successful at what they did. Does anybody, okay, so you may not know about the Enigma, fancy word, right? But does anybody know about encryption? Like, just a general bit. You guys know what encryption is, right? Great, fantastic. Encryption was this device's job. You take a letter, you type it into here, type it into these keys like a typewriter, letters flash on the other side, that's random. Let me explain just a little bit about how it works, actually. So if you hit E on the typewriter, a random letter would actually appear on the light. If you typed E, it could be a P that appeared on the light. If you pressed, but here's the tricky part, right? That's easy, that's okay. So they changed the letters, it's code, I get it, right? Here's the tricky thing. If you pressed E a second time, it wouldn't show P again, it would show F or D or some other thing. It randomized it. And the tricky thing about this is that if a different person, or in this case, a different German, had the same machine and took the transmitted message that was jumbled up, fed it into their machine, they could retrieve the message as clean as it was before. However, anybody who interpreted the message, like the English, for example, or the French, or whoever, they just got these jumbled up letters that didn't mean anything. And for the longest time, the Germans had the higher end in World War II. Going back to this guy, like I said, god of nerds, this guy cracked the code. His name is Alan Turing, British, English, mathematician, computer scientist, before computers were even a thing. He literally is, how do I explain? Probably the single most reason why computers are made in the way they are today. One of the things I wanted to talk about involving this guy is a test, actually, that is created under his name. It's called the Turing Test. If you don't know what the Turing Test is, it is, not that, this. The Turing Test tries to find out whether who you're talking to is a computer or a person. So, the way it works is without any kind of verbal, you can't see who you're talking to or who you're communicating to. You can only see it via text, only through written message. Nice. You send the message in, you ask it questions, you hold a conversation, and by the end, if you cannot tell if A or B is the computer or the person, that means they've passed the Turing test. Now, I know what you might be thinking, there's AI and things like that nowadays, like going back to this. Google has AI. They have AIs that beat the best chess players, beat the best Go players. If you don't know what Go is, it's basically Chinese chess, if you will. The best players in the world were beaten by a computer. How do you tell the difference? Well, you have this conversation, you start talking about politics, you start talking about emotions, all these different things. Computers come up with very strange answers sometimes. So the question still bears, has anyone actually passed the Turing test? Has any computer made it past? The answer flat out is no, not yet. But every single person in this field agrees that it definitely will. Not yet, but it definitely will. This leads to my question is, how do you tell fake from real? This is misinformation. What if you're on Facebook and this nice girl or guy, or whatever floats your boat, starts messaging you, starts flirting with you, starts trying to get you to buy things, or whatever it may be? How can you tell that that is just not a computer? What if it's a person? Maybe you can't tell. There's misinformation here, a trust that you can no longer have. Second of all, this. If it's so easy to communicate, then how do we know we're communicating the right things? We could be communicating the sky is purple because when I woke up, my eyes were blurry. I had tinted paper over my eyes and it was purple. So technically I'm right, but everybody else thinks I'm wrong. This is misinformation, miscommunication. This is currently plaguing us to this day. This is why communication is so important and why evolving communication is dangerous and must be treated carefully. So going with that.
Okay, so I'd like to thank everybody for joining us. In a minute we're going to play a game, but I just want to touch on what Christian, Harsmirat, and Grumkh have had to say. And essentially what that is we've tried to assemble a linear timeline of the evolution of communication and tried to anchor that around changes in technology, because no matter what we say, do, or think in the future that we exist in, technology is about as hardwired into us as it can be at the moment. And in the future, things like bionics and stuff like that are quite literally going to bring hardware into our bodies that will ultimately also change communication. So I'd like to thank everybody for joining us today, and we hope that our presentation provided you with some great insight as to the key turning points in the last almost 440 years of interpersonal communications evolutions. And I'm going to turn this over to Christian, who's going to get a game going. And there are prizes. First place winner gets a $10 gift certificate for Starbucks, and the second place winner gets a really nice sucker that I cracked accidentally. But I mean, it's like a $7 sucker, so Christian, there you go, my man.
Really loud.
That's alright. They don't care. If you guys got your cell phones and you want to play, you gotta break them out.
So
there's a $10 gift certificate on the line, people.
We talked quite a bit about communication. We said a lot. We showed you some videos that said a lot. We kept talking a lot. Now it's time for you guys to communicate with us. And luckily, I hope everybody has this device. It's very easy. Kahoot.in just came to your browser.
Who the hell's K-Money? Nice, that's a great
We got
name.
K-Money, Sweet Tooth, yeah. If we just start the game now and there's only 3 people, the prizes is gonna be really easy. So completely up to you.
Nice, come on, who else is playing, guys? Get
Got
on
like
line.
free coffee and stuff like that.
$10 bucks, gift certificate, man. Wow. There we go, get some more people. Come on, guys, come on, sign in. Let's do this. This is part of your mark, remember that. Not only are you going to get free coffee, maybe, but you're going to get points. Points. That's worth it. You got Rob, Rhea, K-Money.
Okay,
Beethoven.
anybody want more time to do this? There's stuff on the line, it's up to you.
Yeah, give it another minute, man. Give it another minute. Come on, guys, set up. Let's play a game.
So we do multiple choice?
Sorry?
We do multiple choice questions?
Yeah, well, they are. Yeah. This is a fun game. We wanted a way to make this fun. This is not just stupid. This is entertainment. So, with prizes at the end.
Did you know we had a Beethoven?
Yep, right there, Ludwig's over in the chair. This is like Ludwig. How many people we got so far? How many people in this class, miss? 30?
24.
24? 1, 2, oh wait, 1, 2, 3, 4, 8, that's 12 people. We're gonna start the game when we reach 15. So, a couple more people need to sign up right now.
Don't worry, guys. Most of the answers are common sense.
Yeah, but we're at 13. We need 2 more people.
Most of them. All right, not all of them.
This is an easy win. You just got to be quick. All right, that's it. Let's start the game. Oh wait, one more. Is anybody else going to join or what?
Going once, going twice.
3 times.
All right.
Get ready to play. That's your question.
The modern telephone was first theorized in 1876, due by which of the following?
Pretty sure it's Homer Simpson. Oh, I should have said that. Oh. Giving away free answers over here. Should have set that timer at 15 seconds. Giving them too much time, brother. Oh, 12 people got it right. You guys think you're smart?
Yes.
Oh, that's good.
You're
All right,
one
12
for
you
once,
are.
you're right.
Yeah. What's next?
We paid attention to your presentation.
Really? Probably paid attention when you were in grade 3
Whoever
as well.
Yad is, you're number 1 right now. There you go.
Who is killing it? My man!
In what century was the first semaphore introduced as a form of communication?
That's a hard one. That's a hard one. That is a hard one. Yeah, he did that, not me. 15 seconds, guys. I know some of you were paying attention.
When in doubt, just press red.
4, come on, guys. Come on. 13 answers. That's good. Who's going to get this one? Ooh, 6 people said 17. I mean, some of you guys were listening.
Oh, there you go. Let's see who's at the top.
Yeah. Hey, man. This guy's got a Starbucks habit. I don't know if I can support it.
All
All right, let's keep going. There's so many questions here.
What is Morse code?
Oh, dude, that's that newfangled dance. Right? No? It is though, right? No? Right. Oh! I'm pretty sure it's a new way to tie your shoes. I did that yesterday.
Honestly, like, there is a stigma about people sitting in the back of the classroom not listening, but he's like killing it.
Yeah, man. The ladies should be terrified right now.
If somebody gets this wrong, I'm gonna be sad.
Dude, it's totally a new way to tie your shoes.
Alright.
Right?
Fair enough. I
What
would
did
go
they
with
do?
Sam, or New King.
What? Who? My man.
He wants coffee, dude.
He does, man.
What has strengthened the social bonds of our humanity and inspired communication to
Dude,
evolve?
that's so wordy. You wrote that one. Oh, good looks. That's gotta be the answer. 2 people were with me on that. All right.
We didn't do an ethical presentation. We did do it on communication, unfortunately. So the answer is going to be Morse code.
Yes. 8 people. Oh man. Who's at the top now? Who's at the top right now? Oh man, the back of the class. I'm loving it.
The telegraphic communication involves sending electrostatic signals through air.
A cloud, like in the sky, right? Totally, that's gotta be the answer.
Yeah.
Totally.
Put my photos and everything on there.
I heard God can access it, really.
All right.
Oh, look at that.
Wire.
Smart dances.
There you go. Still canwar.
Jesus.
Which method has nearly replaced traditional lettering?
Well, that's legitimately a hard one. Said some guy stepped behind you.
Honestly, if I could do it with laser pointers, I would.
Yeah, I would too, for sure. No,
How would you like to get your food?
in my mouth, like usually. Sometimes I get it on my clothes when I'm eating, you know what I'm saying?
I'm gonna be honest, I don't remember what I placed as the correct answer.
How about that?
All of them. Easy. 3
Nice.
points. Wow. Only 3 of you guys want to go to an actual restaurant.
Yeah, I should say something. Tell you about.
Okay.
I want to see the funny comical names at the top. What's going on with that? I like that. Where's K Money? You're like K bro.
Virtual real life.
Whoa, you guys nailed that one quick, man. This is fun. Are we having fun? Are we? Yeah.
Hanwar is still killing it.
Yeah, he's doing really good right now.
Equalizer.
Sam's doing okay. Josh is coming up there.
What is globalization in the realm of communication?
Ooh, good one. Ooh, that's a hard one. That's mine, though.
Correct answer. When everyone can equally.
I find that interesting, you know, because people were pretty well divided there.
Now, it's true that you mentioned that it's going the way of English, but it doesn't necessarily have to be English.
No, it could be Swahili. Could happen. Someday.
Probably.
Maybe.
Canwar is cheating, for sure.
Stop cheating, Canmore.
The Enigma.
Oh my god, that's totally the Enigma right there, except for it's missing the other half. Where's SpongeBob? Oh, it's not a fish toy.
A spelling mistake. Excellent.
Nice.
Alright. He's got the fastest ears.
Yeah, like, what's up, dude?
How many different encryption settings can the Enigma have?
In order to collect your prize, we'll be drug testing, by the way. So if you're like, you know, cheating or something, or on too much caffeine, like, I don't know.
Now, when I said all of them are going to be common sense, I said most, not all.
Oh, is that even an answerable question?
Yeah. The Enigma actually can be set to over 100 million million different settings.
Really? That's quite the combination. Oh, what happened there? Is this, what, is that our winner? Or no? We got more questions. Who's Jay?
A god, huh?
You are.
What Google project involves AI?
Oh, Google Loon. I heard it's crazy.
AlphaGo, that's correct.
Nice.
So AlphaGo was the Chinese game that I briefly mentioned. It is made by Google, and it was the champion of Go up until I think last year actually. All right, so that is that.
Okay, we got first and second prize that Harsmirat's going to hand out here.
No.
All right.
What?
No, I'm not. I'm.
Joan, you gotta take your prizes.
No, I'm abdicating. Go for the.
All right, fine. You should have had to prove she was a smarty pants.
So
I'm participating.
Yeah, that's cool. So it goes to second place is Kanar, and then Ginger gets the cracked ass. Sorry about that. Yeah, you ladies didn't miss out on much. Not on
You can
much.
trade, I mean, if you want to. Fine.
Give her the starter, man. She wants it. I cracked it though.
Thank you.
Aw. So anyway, are we done? We're wrapping it up now. We got Q&A to come next, guys.
Oh my God, Sam, you're so close.
Sam, who's Sam again? Oh man, I was rooting for you. We had a good talk the other night. Good.
Okay, but yeah, in conclusion, that wraps it up. So thank you for listening, guys.
Now we're gonna do questions and answers. You're not free to leave yet. Hey guys, you wanna come up front and get the answers? Okay, who's got questions for anybody in the
Thank you
group?
very much. I'll let you first of all take.
I have a question from you.
Please speak loudly.
You mentioned about a machine, Enigma, a German encryption machine.
Yeah.
So you know what type of encryption they follow in that, like any type of?
Now,
No, it was a simple
like I
description.
said, Alan Turing, the guy who actually did that, was a god among nerds. And unfortunately, I'm just a casual nerd, right? I know how the device works, how to do that backwards, and then redo that. I'm not quite that smart, not yet. But it has 3 dials that can change basically how it changes all the numbers and letters and everything to different kind of sets. And like the question from earlier said, there's over 100 million different combinations. So the easy answer is no, I don't know exactly how to decrypt that. That's why they had an entire team of people.
And I have one more question from you. So
Yep.
you mentioned about Samuel Morse. He invented the telegraph machine, right?
Yes, it is.
So
More importantly, he also invented the Morse alphabet.
yeah, so he uses the dots as its
Dots and dashes.
Yeah, dots and dashes. So it's also for the blind people, like blind people can also recognize the dots and symbols, like.
Well, from the video that played, yeah, and I mean that kind of makes sense. It's not blind people, I don't think. I think it's
They don't live disabled.
deaf
so.
people, correct, would be using it, right? So ultimately, it
Because
would be
the blind, they also have some boards with dots.
that would be
and something.
Braille. I
Yeah,
think.
Braille, something like that. It's similar to that.
Well, I think it would be a different idea. I think what you're kind of hitting on is that, what we've been saying is there's this evolution of all these points of technology that just continue to grow and build into our infrastructure. And, even something as old as Morse code, even though it's led to other innovations in communication and stuff like that itself, it continues to evolve. And it ends up, being available to blind people to use, deaf people to use to communicate. There's other things they use Morse code for as well.
Like international.
Like international communications and for ships that are at sea when they're in distress.
Thank you.
Okay.
Going off that just a little bit, technology, especially in the terms of communication, does have a tendency to build off of itself. So in Morse code, you have this. This was for SOS, as in like stated in the video.
Right.
Save
But
our
this
soul.
can also be translated into 1110000.
Actually, it's trinary. I looked into it.
Yeah, it's trinary, but
Yeah,
it's
so-
the incorrect thing, but it's still the same.
You just need to put a 2 right there.
Yeah, you can still change it, and
Yeah.
it does technically build off itself, and then
He's talking about expressing actually that. This is funny because this is something that I looked into, is expressing Morse code as binary code. And so what they've been trying to do is express it as I think it's trinary code, or something like that, where the end's 1, there's 0, 1, 2, or whatever. But I mean, it is slightly different, but it's like he's saying, it's this evolution of an idea. It's not just about the technology, it's the idea. That's psychology there that was brought on by the devastation of one man's life and the information that he received too late in life to do anything. And you know, largely today we're using the technology we have and talking how we do because of that moment in his life. So, anybody else got questions for anybody?
You got it for Tristan?
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. So
Samuel, you're next.
You talk about the Turing Test.
yeah.
So what was the exception they came up with that this can be the solution, that you can identify this is a computer or a person? Like the emotions, or do they have a specific kind of question?
There isn't a specific question set. It's the same way that you have a conversation with somebody and you can sort of tell if they're upset at some point, or if you said something offensive or something to that degree. You get these hints and feelings in the way they talk, the way they reply, how fast they reply. All these different things come into consideration. And with the Turing test, the type of questions that are asked and the type of answers that are received are also big considerations. There's no set standard questions that I know of just yet, but they do typically lean towards either politics, emotions, things that would typically not be, machine related.
It's a consciousness test, I was just going to say, because we've been studying about it a lot in psychology and stuff like that. And what it is, it's it's a test to try to cheat consciousness to see if a computer can fool you. Because if a computer can learn from its environment while it's speaking to you to develop its own form of consciousness, then we have an AI that is self-aware. And that's what the point of the Turing test is. And every year Google puts on, I think it's Google, every year there's a big science firm that puts on, or a college, maybe it's MIT or something, it's $25,000 a year for students to enter the Turing test to try to actually fool humans. Okay, so Sam, you have a question, and then we'll go to Bade. No? All right.
Sorry, it's good because I will just complement the answer that we can compare this kind of Turing test like chatbot is what is that we have nowadays. If you go to our website, so there is a chat there, so you can ask questions, and if you don't know if it is a person or not, so it's kind of similar.
That is the same idea. I mean, that is, yeah, but it's not consciousness or awareness. I mean, if they're fooling you, they're doing a good job. I have had that experience a couple times myself where I was like being very friendly, and then all of a sudden I realized like these answers are very just straightforward and the same thing. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, never mind. But I mean, ultimately, that's what they're trying to do. I think ultimately, in the end, just to throw that this is on topic, but from a different class, I think ultimately we're going to learn to develop bioorganic hardware that will be able to control through the destruction of that hardware if it's necessary. Because it's pretty much the only way I think it's going to be possible for us to develop a form of consciousness that actually can exist and be real. But I mean, I think the paradox to that is in order for that to exist, just like we do, it needs to be self-destructive. You know what I'm saying? Or else we're sorry. Anybody else got questions for? How about her? Simran, your mood. Oh, we got one in the back.
I have a question about this. As you talk about how people used to be communicating in the past, or how they will be in the future in 20 or 30 years, according to you, there are more negative or positive points for future?
Like you can't predict. It would be, the communication would be easier. It would be more like you can save the time. But the point I was saying that interpersonal communication will decrease. It's not like there is no positive or negative type of thing. For like if the time is gonna decrease and it would be more relevant, more easy to communicate, so it's gonna help every one of us. As I told about virtual reality, it's gonna if someone's in different countries, you don't need to take a flight to go over there and waste your time or stuff. You can still do the same stuff by sitting at the home. But the thing is, it would affect the interpersonal communication too. You can't share your feelings with your friend, you're not gonna talk with your family or stuff. So they're both same positive and same negative points. You can't just say that it's gonna be good or bad in future.
I think it depends on us how we are gonna take that. How we gonna accept that like we can also use the old methods like we are using now in the future.
That's a very good point. We can, and that's kind of what I was talking about in terms of when I was wrapping it up earlier. Is with Morse code and blind people, as you were pointing out, there's still this evolution where we can still use things like letter mail, even though we have email, and we can still use things like the Telegraph when necessarily we don't have to. John, did you have a question?
Well, it's interesting because I sort of had a question along the similar lines as you had for you, Harsmirat, because you had detailed, for instance, that people will have less reason to interact with both family and, say, a waiter at a restaurant. But I wonder what the consequences of that are, whether people's ability to communicate will actually diminish. Yes, you may have the choice, but if you're not doing it, do you actually get worse at being able to communicate face-to-face?
I think that's what you're saying.
It's the communication skills gonna diminish. Like, actually, no one wants to waste their time. Everyone will still find a easier way to communicate. Like, it's not like everyone would try. If you can have a call with your friend on a phone, so you won't discuss the same, you won't take time to go to him and discuss the same thing if you can have a solution on the phone. So the communication skills are automatically gonna diminish. You are not gonna meet more people, like you're not gonna make more friends or stuff, no more sharing of the feelings and stuff.
On that point, it is important to consider what you actually define and consider as communication. Because even though you're not talking face to face with somebody, you're ordering something, you are technically communicating with the restaurant that you want something and that you will give something for something. They give you your food, they show up at your door, you give them the money, all of that kind of happens, and you are communicating something, right? It may not be the same type of communication, but there is something still being said there, right?
It's very bare bones though, you know what I mean?
Yeah. And it's similar because even on an online culture, you could become, maybe you're a vlogger, maybe you're somebody who goes to forums and just constantly puts up reviews or whatever it is, doesn't really matter to me. Maybe that's what you're adept at. Maybe you can make really good analysis written down on code, on text, on paper, and maybe you're just not that kind of person who's good at face-to-face communication. Those people exist even today, right? And we don't have these technologies super, super prevalent every single moment of our lives, right? So, I mean, these things already exist.
Yeah, just to follow up, but it's interesting because, for instance, you could still be a good sort of back and forth conversationalist via text, but I think what we lose is the ability to use our facial expressions. So I've just had the insight that perhaps what I'm noticing, which is a lack of facial expression generally in the population, is because many people are not used to doing face-to-face, so they're just, because they're interacting with the screen, they don't have to have a facial expression, unless they're doing, obviously, a video.
And that's where learning from this course also.
So, but anyway, but in a world where if you're still called in for a person-to-person interview, facial expression matters. So until that doesn't matter, you've got to learn to do the facial expressions until it really doesn't matter, until we've all changed to just a different way of being in the world. So it's interesting. I understand why it's happening, but we're at that transition period maybe. Just a different follow-up. So the test in Blade Runner must be based off the Turing test, right? Has anybody seen Blade Runner?
I think it was.
Yeah.
Blade Runner. Everybody's seen Blade Runner.
Yeah. So I hadn't made that connection.
We've all seen Blade Runner.
I hadn't made that connection to the Turing test.
Oh, really?
But that's clearly what it was.
Yeah, no, absolutely. There's a lot of in sci-fi relation to all of this AI stuff. It's basically the only thing that keeps it all going.
What is it? I think it's Universal Man or I, Robot or something like that. All these different movies talk about machines being very human-like, very humanoid-like AI. A person turning into half robot, becoming eternal for life. Is he actually human? Does he actually have rights? All these different movies are kind of based off of this idea.
And the philosophy behind it as well.
Yeah, and just to quickly not re-emphasize, but to clear up some maybe misunderstandings about the Turing test. I believe Turing was actually found to be homosexual.
Yeah, he was
And-
persecuted.
Yeah, he was.
Oh, yes, he was.
Despite having won the war.
Yeah, it wasn't
Yeah.
acceptable in old Britain at the time. So he got persecuted for it and he committed suicide.
He had a mental disability too, I believe.
He was also a genius, so I can't really blame
Yeah.
him for anything. But the point is that it wasn't so much at the time, the Turing test wasn't so much for AI or machines as much as it was just to differentiate people who were different. Because at the time it was considered that anybody who was different was not human and they didn't retain the same rights as a normal human being. His question was basically, because he knew he wasn't normal, is that, does that make him any less human? And to his conclusion, he found that it didn't make him any less human.
So one more thing I was going to add to something he had said earlier. Everybody in the field of AI has very high hopes for consciousness artificially, but that's just everybody in the field of AI. Because that's where they get paid. If you talk to philosophers, they will tell you that.
Elon Musk.
No. Anyway, sorry, Sam.
No, even here, like I had a lab, it was a lab actually, like a final project for one of the programming class here. You have actually two developed, it's called ELIZA, I think, also is a programming technique or exercise where you develop kind of like psychiatrists. Like a shrink, but is electronic, and you have to ask a question for her, and she will respond to you based on what question do you have. But of course, we're doing like in a low level, you don't have that much options. But it is pretty cool exercise on seeing, like, because you kind of have to realize what the input is going to be. And so let's say for my example, when people put in caps lock, she would be like, hey, are you adding me? And she kind of get an attitude, and after that, she wouldn't respond the same as you would put in like all.
So like a real woman.
Lowercase, but it is kind of like this one saying like you kind of learn this because that's I think is one of the main roles that computer is going like.
It doesn't know how to differentiate, between, because it's not consciously aware, right? All it can do is go to the
Yeah,
database.
because you're based on the question, right? It's not
going to the
conscious.
database to look for the file or whatever. But yeah, that's still very interesting. I didn't realize they were doing that.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Questions? Or are we finished, people? Anybody else? Questions? We good? Hand clap and then we're here. Thank you guys for joining us.
Interpersonal communication. Join the nation. Communication, revolution, and evolution.